Hello and welcome to the Book Bunch. My name is Sam. It is so great to have you guys here for another video. If you can hear my daughter in the background, it is just because she is playing with her dad and yes, everything is okay if you hear noises. But this video we are talking about This Present Darkness by Frank Peretti. This has been a book that has been on my TBR for a long time now, probably one of the, if not the most delayed book that I have owned. I have been wanting to read this book since, well, I've been trying to read it since I was 12, but for a many number of years it was just too scary for me to read. And then I put it off for a long time because I just was a bit wary. And then you guys all convinced me that I needed to give it a go because he's such a great author. And I finally did it. I finally actually read the book all the way through. And so these are my thoughts. So, coming to that, what do I actually think of This Present Darkness? And honestly, I didn't love it as much as I thought I would. Like, from other people's opinions, I thought it would probably be a 5 out of 5 star for me. But it definitely didn't hit that mark. And I don't really know why, apart from maybe it's just the genre isn't really for me. In terms of like, it's sort of fantasy because there is the spiritual element to it and the spiritual realm element to it. But it's also like, if that's like the only part that would consider it even a fantasy book, the rest of it is more like a crime detective kind of story because it mostly follows this one journalist, well, two a journalist and then his like employee, that they both go investigating all this stuff that's happening in their town and all this like corruption that's going on. So it's mostly actually about that more than anything, I would say. The other main focus is obviously really into prayer and like casting out demons and all of that kind of thing, which was good. I did enjoy that part of it. It was more just when the spiritual stuff wasn't happening, I found that I was a little bit bored. And I don't know if it's just because it wasn't my go-to genre or not, if that makes sense. But if you like crime and investigation, I feel like you would really enjoy this book because that's kind of the main thing. I definitely will say though that like, this was written back in the 80s. He's written a lot of work since then. I have some of his other work and I will definitely read that. So it wasn't like bad enough or poorly written enough for me to be like, nah, I don't like him as an author. I do acknowledge that this was one of his first books, and so like issues with the writing and different things is not a bother for me because people get better at writing as they go along, and it wasn't so poorly written that it was a turn off. It was just not the best writing I've ever experienced, if that makes sense. And yeah, so the book follows this one guy who he has come to this small town trying to escape the craziness of New York, and he becomes the owner of this newspaper called the Clarion. He's only got like a handful of employees under him because it's just a very small newspaper, and he's hoping that he can just get simple stories and all of that. But God kind of has other ideas for him because yes, he is kind of a man of faith, but it's more like a Sunday faith than anything else. Um, just because he hasn't really experienced Jesus in any way. And the church that he goes to is actually really terrible and is actually run by a bad guy. Um, So there's this guy, and he's got a wife and a daughter, and he's got issues with his daughter because they don't see eye to eye on pretty much anything. And the daughter feels a bit neglected by the father because in previous years he was never around because he was too busy with his newspaper. So there's issues there. And the other main character is a guy named Hank, who is this young pastor who has just joined one of the other churches. And him and his wife Mary, they were called there by God, but some of the congregation don't want him there and are trying to kick him out because he's preaching the gospel as he should and is rebuking people and making sure that his congregation isn't allowing sin into their lives and is trying to make that a big deal, which it should be. It should be how a church is. But some of the sinners in the congregation aren't happy with that. I hope I'm explaining that well. Like, there's some people that are in the church that are just in the church for like appearances more than actually because they love Jesus and they want to live a Christ-led life. And this pastor is kind of pressuring everyone to live a Christ-filled life as you should, and is like convicting them, and they're not okay with that conviction, if that makes sense. um I did definitely like the direction that things went in. I do though think that he was maybe a bit um it was a little bit fantastical to me, or over exaggerated, I guess, in some bits in the ending about how some people came to Jesus, and like when there was situations of casting out demons, which that in itself is not fantastical. It's more just, I don't know if it's just because it wasn't written well that it seemed like it was too good to be true, if that makes sense. Again, these things are totally possible, but I just felt the way he wrote them was, I don't I don't know how to explain it. I hope you understand what I'm saying, but if you don't, I'll try and like explain it better to you in the comments if you want to ask me about it. But yes, I did overall enjoy it. I'd probably give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So on Goodreads I put it down as a 4. But it didn't capture me as much as I'd like to, but I still think as a Christian you should give it a read, give it a try, see where you land on it, because it's definitely interesting and worth reading, more so because there isn't very many spiritual realm books out there that are Christian. um, I do prefer the Mortal Sight series, which is technically young adult, but it is more action based and more like, it feels more like a fantasy story than just crime, if that makes sense. I don't know how to. It's just as if they're just different genres, but like both deal with the spiritual realm, if that makes sense. And I just prefer the way that Mortal Sight does it, just because my background is more fantasy action reading, whereas this was a little bit slower and more investigative. I hope that makes sense. So I do recommend Mortal Sight if you have read this, especially if you are a fantasy lover. Um, But yeah, if there's any other spiritual realm stuff that you know about, please let me know in the comments below, because I do like that idea and that genre, like subgenre, I guess you'd call it. Um, because I've experienced that kind of stuff in real life. So I'm always interested to see how people write it. It's very interesting to me. I would say that a, some of the ways he describes encounter, like the Christians encountering the demons, is very accurate. So I would love to like be able to talk to Frank and see if he has had similar encounters to what I've had. and similar encounters to what is in the book, because some of it was like spot on, and wasn't fictionalized. So I found that really cool. Whereas I feel like with Mortal Sight, it was more fictionalized, if that makes sense. Um, I keep saying if that makes sense a lot because I'm just struggling to find words to describe this book. I don't know if it's just like I need more time to digest it before I can have full cohesive thoughts, but yes, I'm just at least trying to explain it to you as best I can, with what I am working with. But yes, I don't know if I will like move straight on to the second book in this one. I think I actually might go read Illusion or The Oath first, because he has written lots of spiritual books in different genres. Like this again is investigative, but then his Illusion book is meant to be sci-fi esque, and then his Monster and The Oath books are meant to be more thriller fantasy kind of genre behind the spiritual stuff. So I might go try that stuff first, just because that's more in my wheelhouse in regards to the base story, and see if I prefer that. But I do like how it really does bring the attention to how important prayer is, especially communal prayer and prayer as a church, because I do feel like a lot of us go, oh, prayer's not that important, or I can't be bothered. Or then there's some of us that love praying, but it's more of a private thing, and they forget that Jesus is very clear that we should be meeting and praying, and that like when multiple people are together, God is there and working. And I think sometimes we as Christians glaze over that kind of stuff, because it's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and push some of those kind of things aside. I know for me, like fasting, I just did not want to do. I did not want to do it. And so I just didn't. And then God convicted me recently, and I gave it a go for the first time, and it taught me a lot. And so I think that's one of those things that like we shouldn't let the world get in the way of what God has instructed us to do. And there's some things that God is very clear about in the Bible that we need to be doing. And I do think communal prayer is one of those things, because that's how the Spirit moves. Like we have God's power, and if we're not using that through prayer, then that like we're letting the enemy get a foothold and like get an advantage. So we definitely need to be more on the ball with that. I know I do. So yes, I do like that that was also a big focus of the book, is just how powerful prayer can be. I do think that was very cool. But yes, I do like Hank and Mary. They were cool. I wish they were my pastors and pastor's wife. But yeah, um, let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this book. I know there are some polarizing views on this just from checking out Goodreads. Some people definitely got the very wrong impression from this book. So I'd be interested to see what you guys think about it, if you guys loved it, if you guys didn't love it. Um, yeah, I just want someone to talk to about it, because I think that'll kind of help me get my thoughts like together for it. It might even bring up my rating. I don't know, but we will see. So let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if there's any other spiritual books you recommend, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.